Hey, it's AW, and we back today, guys, with another one. And today we're going to be going over why the Dragon Ball superhero movie essentially does not fix the timeline, and why the timeline for Dragon Ball renders the power scaling very broken and hard to scale. And today we're going to get into why that is. Today we're going to get into, a few things on just the timeline being very important for power scalers to fall back on when we are scaling. The timeline is so important for a verse. But this topic came up by one of my subscribers, and I wanted to talk about it. As many Dragon Ball power scalers know, the timeline for Dragon Ball is completely screwed up. When the Dragon Ball Hero movie came out, I was very curious on where it would fit in the timeline. And now that it has been announced, as far as where it fits in the timeline, officially the Dragon Ball superhero movie is after the Broly movie and after the Tournament of Power, but before the Moro and Granola arcs. So here's the problem. Those that remember Z, remember Pan was born at the end of Z, but she was a young girl by the time skip during the Dragon Ball Z anime. Now again, you guys have to be pretty old. Some of you guys have to be a little bit older to remember the end of Dragon Ball Z. By that time, Pan was already flying across the world and a highly proficient fighter. So proficient, she defeated Goten in the 28 tournament. During this tournament, the 28 tournament, she was about 4 or 5 at the conclusion of Dragon Ball Z. So if the movie Dragon Ball Superhero takes place after the Tournament of Power and the Broly movie, based on the conclusion of the Dragon Ball Z Pan would be older than 5 in the Dragon Ball Superhero movie. The other issue is, if you'll notice, in the Dragon Ball Superhero movie, Pan had just realized how to fly. But yet in Z, in the 28 tournament, she had already been flying across the world and already defeated Goten. Are you guys hearing what I'm saying? She's stronger than a Super Saiyan. How? By the end of Dragon Ball Z, she's strong as a Super Saiyan. She's as strong as a Super Saiyan by the end of Dragon Ball Z. Goten is a Super Saiyan. So, how that jump from Dragon Ball Superhero, the movie, her being 4.5, because essentially in the Dragon Ball Superhero movie, she was 4.5. You're telling me it was a 6-month jump and she became as strong as Super Saiyan Goten? It doesn't. The timeline's not matching up. The power scaling is not matching up. The other issue this leads is the fact that Gohan had possession of the beast form. Correct? It would be that he had the possession of the beast Gohan form during the Z anime, but he never showed it. Strictly from the fact that Pan at the end of Z was 4 years old. Now here's how the timeline, now in the new timeline for the Dragon Ball Superhero movie, she's 4.5, but she hasn't even realized how to fly until this movie. Many scholars forget that the end of Z was a time skip to the 28th World Tournament, where Buu and Goku flew off together. I keep telling you guys, during that time skip, Pan was last seen fighting Goten and beating him. She already knew how to fly. This also begs the question is, if this happened, if the Dragon Ball Superhero movie happened before the Moro arc, this begs the question, why didn't Gohan and Piccolo utilize these forms in the face of Moro? Why did they not come out and utilize these forms? It's just, again, this is muddling the power scaling. During Dragon Ball Z, At the age of 4.5, Pan already knew how to fly and was already flying around the Dragon Ball verse. Well, not the verse, but the planet. There's another thing to consider, Powerscalers, and this is one of the reasons Dragon Ball is the most misscaled verse. Of course, you have a boatload of amateur Powerscalers in the verse, but it's not entirely their fault. The writing is to blame as well. For example, in the Dragon Ball Hero movie, Pan is seen as a young girl at 4 years old, and she still could not fly until near the end of the movie. Again, in the Dragon Ball Z anime, by the age of 4.5, she was already flying around the entire Earth and was participating in the 28th tournament, beating a Super Saiyan. While Pan is not a major character in the Dragon Ball verse, she is not the only character that affected the timeline and the power scaling of Dragon Ball due to writing being just inadequate. We all remember GT and how the tail turned from being a symbol of Saiyan weakness to a strength as Vegeta and Goku's tail grew back after achieving this form. Ever since the creation of GT, there has been a debate on whether Super Saiyan 4 is comparable to Ultra Instinct due to the writers placing it above Super Saiyan 3. And this is a minor character who kind of screws around with the timeline, would be Android 17. You know, he's another character who he kind of screws around with the timeline, and it's a very small little question. It's a very little small question. The question becomes, how did Android 17 become so powerful strictly from protecting animals on an island? The events prior to Z would have placed him much weaker than Super Saiyan 2. Yet in the Dragon Ball Super manga and anime, he was able to go toe to toe with Super Saiyan God form Goku. So the question becomes, how did he become so powerful strictly for fighting poachers? He also was able to go toe to toe with Jiren. His barrier technique is cool and we like it. I love it. I wouldn't take it away. But when he developed these techniques, it would have been nice to see how he developed some of these techniques and how his strength had risen during this time. You know, poachers are not adequate fighting or training. You know, if he had stated, "Oh, I was training with other androids," you know, one could understand that. But he wasn't. He didn't state that. So this is something else that, you know, the timeline needs to be looked upon. The timeline for Dragon Ball is unstable and has been for quite some time. I was hoping for the introduction of the Dragon Ball superhero movie would help stabilize and bring a little continuity to the anime and manga I loved so much as a child. It would also help many of us power scalers, at least the veterans. I know the veterans who follow the verses and understand how Dragon Ball Z ended. It would help a lot of us be able to correctly scale the Dragon Ball Z verse. Real power scalers who know how to scale don't even discuss scaling Dragon Ball characters unless they understand how unstable the timeline is and how it affects appropriate scaling for the verse. All in all, Dragon Ball Superhero movie was a good movie, but it still did not fix the scaling issues or the timeline issues that are present within the Dragon Ball verse and the power scaling community. And let me hear your thoughts and comments down below. This AW and I'm out.